religion and liberty. So I'll let the introductions be done individually. Ben Stone.
Hi, I'm Ben Stone from badquaker.com.
I'm Brian Hagan, and I'm an anarcho-Christian. I've also been very active in the liberty movement in a lot of different radio broadcasts and podcasts and so on. And glad to be here today to kind of discuss how Christianity and liberty can really work hand in hand outside of some of those ways that you may have been taught that aren't really in alignment with liberty in many ways with Christianity. We'll get into that in a bit.
My name is David Wright. I'm a practicing Zen Buddhist in the Quantum School of Zen. It's a Korean variety of Zen.
My name is William Coley. Most people know me as a redneck Muslim anarchist. I run Muslims for Liberty, and I'm also the host of. I run Muslims for Liberty, and I'm also the host of the Call of the Rebel radio show on the Voluntary Virtues Network.
So, having been in the liberty community for some time, there seem to be factions. And, one of the factions says that the very worst thing going on in the world is people believe in imaginary people in the sky. How does everybody address that?
Well, in my view, let's say if somebody believes, let's use that terminology because that has a tendency to yeah. So let's imagine that they believe in the magic spaghetti monster or whatever, and let's say that they go into their basement once a day and they burn incense and they eat spaghetti and they do whatever it takes for your magic spaghetti monster religion. In my opinion, as long as you're not aggressing on somebody else, enjoy your spaghetti. And if you don't believe in spaghetti, as long as you're not aggressing on somebody else, enjoy your lack of spaghetti. And beyond that, I don't think it's anybody's business one way or the other. Now, and they always fall back to, but religions have started every war in history. That's a lie. Well, religion is what divides people. That's a lie. In my opinion, the state divides people, and it's the governments of the world who have started and completed every war. Many times, if not most of the time, they'll use religion as an excuse. As a matter of fact, many times, if not most of the time, governments will use religion as an excuse to exist. But the government's the problem. It's not the religion. It's not the abuse of the religion. So whether or not you believe, in my opinion, again, whether or not you believe in a magic spaghetti monster or you don't, is not the point. The point is, are you trying to force yourself on other people? Are you trying to force people to behave in a way you want them to behave? Well, then you're the problem, not the guy who believes in the magic spaghetti monster.
I think Ben summed it up very well there. I guess the main thing comes to mind first is always a question. Why do you care? Why do you care what I believe? Why do you care if I believe in the divinity of Jesus Christ? Why does that really matter to you? Why does that anger you and enrage you that I believe that? I'm not forcing that on you. I'm not coming to your door and knocking and trying to push my message on you. It's just something I believe. I don't even necessarily talk about it all that much. But once somebody finds that out, and it seems like that really is very widespread in the liberty movement, once they find that out, to a certain degree, for a short period, you're almost a pariah. They think that you're going to try to spread some mumbo-jumbo voodoo sacrificing chickens in front of them, and it's very different than that. So with that said, they also become very aggressive sometimes in their questioning of why you, and they want to make these arguments, and I don't want to argue. I just know what I know. Louis Armstrong was once quoted in the 1930s or 40s when he was asked, what is jazz? And he said, if you don't dig it, you ain't never going to dig it. And that's how I feel about my religion. It's a very personal matter. My religion allows me to embrace liberty, I think, fuller than I necessarily could have without that religion. And that's been quite the journey in and of itself. But to keep it short, I don't know why it really matters. I don't know why it's a combative topic at all.
Yeah, I agree both with what they said. And I'll add a little more to that, just to how Buddhism and maybe Zen addresses some of these issues. There's not a lot of actual historical stuff that actually recorded what the actual Buddha said. But one of the things that his followers asked him, 2,500 years ago, and they wanted to know what happened when you died. And he would just simply look at people and smile, because that comes from a confused mind and a place of maybe dissatisfaction with what's going on right now. And what Buddhism tries to do is express to you that if you're facing the spaghetti monster, if you're looking at Jesus right now, or you're meeting him tomorrow, then sure, address those things, deal with those things, handle those things 100%, and then come back to this moment and address this moment 100%. Live your life now, live your life completely now. And a lot of the other liberty aspects of that come into that. If you're 100% here, or you're 100% devoted to your life in this moment, you're going to do a pretty darn good job of it. And there's a lot more things I could comment on that, but I'll pass it over to Will.
Well, I think first of all that I'm glad that you brought this topic up, because this debate, I call it the antitheist movement, because you have the atheist movement, and your classical atheist is someone that's usually pretty cool. Like they're like, oh, I don't believe in what you believe in, and that's that's the end of the conversation. Like usually the conversation is never even had. It's the antitheist movement that I'm seeing. And not only is it creating this sectarianism within the liberty community that you're talking about, it's also, I'm finding it brings out the worst in people. I've seen people who are looked at as pretty, or at least they look as themselves as pretty high up in the liberty community, like advocate that people's children be taken away from them because of the fact that they have a personal religious tradition and their children are being raised in a home to believe in their religious faith. They're actually accusing parents of abuse. And I don't understand how you can advocate the state take away a child from someone and still claim to be a voluntarist. It doesn't equate to me. So it's something that really needs to be addressed. But as far as I know, the theists in the argument, their view is to each his own. The only people that seem to have a problem, that feel like they need to say, well, the thick versus thin libertarian thing, like there's this list, and on that list, if you're a real libertarian, then you're an atheist, end of story. Well, the only person that seems to have a problem is your side. Like the only people that are pissed off about anything are the anti-theists. And I think that kind of shows a point of their very argument, and the flaws in it is the fact that it creates this aggression within them. Well, if you have something that creates an aggression within you that could make you advocate that someone's rights or children or property be taken away from them because of something, I think that is way more of a problem than whether or not, as Molyneux puts it, that I believe in a Bronze Age imaginary sky daddy or whatever his thing. None of that matters if I'm not advocating or encouraging or speaking about anything that could be construed as like state violence or personal violence against someone simply because of their ideas, what they, things that they're doing that aren't harming other people.
I see those in the liberty community who take a strong religious stance as beset on all sides. You guys have to deal with not only folks in the liberty community that might have their opinions, but a lot of times people within your own religions and this is probably the worst, that no one ever gets to talk to you about in the liberty community, but how much harder it is to talk to Muslims, Christians, Buddhists I don't know, but I'm really interested in finding out. Quakers I'm very familiar with. And what is that like for you?
Well, Mark, probably as you have faced as well, in dealing with other Quakers, I've had a diversity as wide as the number of Quakers I've dealt with. There are a lot of Quakers that really get this message, and there are a lot of Quakers who listen to it and say, well, that's kind of interesting. Maybe I'll check that out or whatever. And there are Quakers who say, well, I'm not buying it. And they have, many of them have what we might consider socialist views or socialist agendas, and they're kind of stuck in some of the same typical stuff that other statists are stuck in. And then I've actually had a couple, but I had one guy that really stands out. I was talking about him just a few minutes ago, that actually told me that not only was I destined for hell because of what I do and what I say, but that I'm actually causing him to the possibility that he might go to hell because of my beliefs and the things I'm saying. And I thought, well, as I've said before, my first thought when the guy said that to me was, okay, you're crazy. We're done talking. I have better things to do. But then in retrospect, I thought, you know what I should have said was, prove to me, because you're already premising this, prove to me there's a hell. Prove to me, because you're premising that I am, not only am I going to hell, but I'm somehow forcing you to go to hell because of what I believe. Prove that hell exists, and I'll wait while you're making the argument. Not just say, well, I believe it, therefore, but actually prove it to me. And then we can continue with the discussion, because my point is, I don't know if I believe in a hell or not. I'm looking for truth. And if the truth is that there is a hell, I would like to know about it. And if the truth is there is no hell, I'd like to know that too, because I seek the truth, and I don't care what somebody's opinion is. That's all I'm seeking. So I've seen that. Go back to the question. I've seen the spectrum as wide as the number of different Quakers that I've seen, because Quakers themselves are extremely diverse people.
It gets very frustrating sometimes, to answer the question, Mark, because you get hit from both sides very heavily. And within the Liberty community, I see that community as a very embracing community that's very much like a family. But then when they attack you for your beliefs, it becomes very odd and off-putting, and you really question, did I do something wrong? And then with my brand of Christianity, Christians don't get it at all. Christians don't understand it. They somehow believe that when you go into a church, you're actually in a building built by God, and they have an American flag in there, and they have absolutely no questions on why it should be a problem to swear upon a Bible in a courtroom. Swear ye no oath. You never swear an oath upon this earth. You only swear an oath to God. Let your yea be yea and your nay be nay. Only speak truth. You don't work for the state. You're not a slave of the state. You're a slave only to God. And when I say that, you're not even a slave. And that's one of the big arguments I get a lot of the time as well. But then again, you're giving up your individuality because now you're committed. It's my choice. I'm choosing to be. It's no different than we've had this discussion a million times since I've been here since Sunday. BDSM is a good example of that. You're allowing yourself into the ownership of that person that you love. It's not really slavery. And that's how religion is too. And a lot of Christians don't understand that either. They go into it and live their lives from a fear-based mentality, fearful of God. I embrace God, and I know that God and Christ specifically have called me to work outside of the state. The state is the dominion of Satan, and outside of the state is the kingdom of God. And when you try to explain that to them, it just blows their minds, and they don't think you're a Christian. So you end up getting ostracized from both sides many times.
I thankfully don't have a lot of problems being a Buddhist in the Liberty community, most of the time because I don't tell anybody I'm a Buddhist. A lot of the times I think Buddhism and Liberty movement are very compatible. I think there's a lot of very similar things in both areas. But one of the things about Buddhism is it's about being in the present and living the moment and being ultimately responsible for everything you do. And some of the things that you learn in Buddhism is that you try to become detached from your ideas and your concepts. So as I've been doing this Buddhist Zen thing for probably 15 years now, I consider myself less of a Buddhist or a Zen guy than I was when I started, though I think it probably means that I'm more of a Zen Buddhist guy than I was back then. So it's kind of a double-edged sword with that, because I don't like to tell people. I'm just a guy. Right now I'm a guy with a microphone in his hand talking on stage. That's what I am. Tomorrow I'll be doing something else. Tonight I'll probably be drunk. Who knows what's gonna happen. But right now, this very moment, I'm a guy talking about Buddhism here on stage, and this is a very appropriate venue to talk about it. And I'm glad to be here. And I think some of the problems is when people come up and have an argument with you about your religion, a lot of times what they're doing is they're trying to change how you feel about something. And you're not really arguing with you about your beliefs. They feel maybe you shouldn't feel the way about what you believe. And when you get like that, you're in a real rough spot, especially if you're trying to convince them the other direction, that maybe they shouldn't be the way they are. You get in an argument with someone who's convinced that they're going to heaven and that all and you immediately are like, well, are you sure? And then you start picking at them for maybe them feeling that way, and you're actually arguing with someone's kind of peaceful thought process. They just want to feel comfortable that they're going to go somewhere when they die. And when you tell them that maybe that's not going to happen, and you're very, very pushy about it, or try to convince them otherwise, you're telling them they shouldn't feel comfortable. That's a really hard argument to do. And thankfully in Buddhism, you can believe whatever you want. You can beliefs are kind of something we try not to put forward so much in Buddhism. You believe what's in front of you, and you believe fully what you're doing. And if you focus on that 100%, you're probably not going to bother a lot of people. So that's a little bit of what Buddhism think about this. So I'm going to pass it over to Will.
It's quite a question. Well, when I started my work, I actually worked with Tea Party groups, oddly enough. So if anybody can imagine what it's like to be a person who talks about Islamic jurisprudence to groups of Tea Partiers, only time I ever had a gun pulled on me. Yeah, Tea Party events were fun. Some of them were really great, and some of them were scary. I mean, I had my wife and my children with me, and there were times where I felt like it was probably a better idea that I had left them at home. But at Liberty events, like the Liberty community, like the Libertarian Party or PorcFest or Liberty Forum or Music Liberty Fest, there's always that one guy. You know, like everybody can be happy that I'm there and happy with the work that we do and happy with everything that's been said, but there's always that one guy or that one girl who is their entire conception of a Muslim is directly connected to a stereotype. And I don't fulfill any of those stereotypes, unfortunately for them. And they, I don't know if they just can't wrap their head around it, but they always respond in the same aggressive manner, like we saw with the event yesterday. They either come with something that's completely unfounded, that literally, like, it's the most insane thing you've ever heard in your life, or they just, like, you can tell that there's an innate aggression behind the way that they're coming toward you. As far as dealing with Muslims, well, it's both sides. You know, like, since Illume magazine did their first article on Muslims for Liberty's work, when the author decided that he thought that a Muslim libertarian group was a purple cow and people might want to read about that, you know, all of a sudden Muslim libertarians and anarchists came out of the woodwork. You know, like, I had 5 Muslim friends that were libertarian, and the next thing I know, I had like 300, you know, and they're coming from all over the world. Like, this isn't just like Muslims in the U.S. I mean, we're talking about Muslims in Pakistan that have set up their own bimetal bank that you can use a debit card with, that they designed to fight back against fiat currency in Pakistan. You know, I mean, these are serious libertarians. These are people that are putting their lives in danger. Like, you think you're a badass because you're a libertarian and you, like, shake your fist at the state in the U.S.? Go shake your fist at the state in Pakistan. You know what I'm saying? Like, these people, they put all of us, everybody at this whole event, to shame because of the fact, like, they put signs in their windows that say, "We accept silver." And it's completely illegal. The cops can come and shut their business down, take them and throw them and just keep them forever without ever charging them with anything. And these people are doing it openly and defiantly, like giving the finger to the government, and they don't even care. Like 2 weeks ago, a guy flipped out in the middle of the street in Saudi Arabia. It was the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life. It literally brought tears to my eyes. This man's like, "This government is corrupt. It's oppression. Islam says this and you do this. Islam protects the rights of man and you are oppressive, and I'm not afraid of you or your prisons anymore." Nobody's seen him since. He's vanished off the face of the earth. That's balls. I wish I had balls like that. I don't know anybody that does, but that guy. And that's what I get to see because I expose myself to those people. But then the other side is like the well, the Obama, Muslims for Obama, and guess what? They're already the Muslims for Hillary, and they didn't learn a single thing from 2008 to today. Like nothing. They're like, oh, well, the Democrats are nice to us, so let's just kiss their butt and like throw our religion out the window and advocate for things that the Democrat Party advocates for, like gun control, that have nothing to do with our faith, or actually counter to our faith. And then when you point that out to them, and they even acknowledge that there's religious tradition, like writing that says, like, you can't do that. Like, this isn't the Sunnah. This isn't the way of Islam. Oh, but the necessity. Oh, but. So they're openly acknowledging that in the name of acceptance from a political party, so that the state will acknowledge them as human beings, basically, they're willing to throw their faith out the window. So, I mean, that's what I see. I see the craziness with them, but then I see, with the Muslims, I have the luck of being able to see, like, those of them that are on our side, not only on our side, but fighting in ways we never even dreamed of. And then, the milquetoast liberal, back to you.
I'm going to open it up to questions here in just a moment. I had some questions I would feel like I can set a foundation with in this way. That's why I'm asking about what it's like, the challenges you face inside the Liberty communities, the challenges you face inside your community of faith. And then looking at these challenges, you kind of you wonder to yourself, is this worth the payoff? Why do I do this? And I want to know what it is that drives each one of you to claim to be a person of faith in the Liberty community and claim to be a person of liberty in your community of faith.
I would actually like the luxury of not having to, but there's something inside my head that will not let me be anything other than what I am. I envy somebody who doesn't even think about these things. I envy the idea that a person can wake up in the morning and go through their whole day and not even consider any of these topics. But instead, I'm stuck with a brain that is constantly telling me how it's kind of like, I was talking to Bill Bupert about this. We should have had him on this panel because he's a Stoist. I didn't think of that till just now, but I was talking to Bill Bupert about this, and I wake up in the morning and I walk in, I look in the mirror, and I know that that guy is judging me. And I don't care about anybody else's judgment of me. That's the guy I got to live with every single day. And if I'm not true to that, I can't escape that guy. That guy in that mirror looks at me, and he sees all the way in, and he sees every secret that I know. And he sees everything that I see and don't say anything about. And I can't deal with that guy looking at me and then saying, now face your grandson and tell him why you didn't say anything. I can't live with that.
I echo what Ben said. It's not something that you can really escape from. It's within you, and the two are intertwined. My love of liberty is intertwined with my love of Christ, and my love of Christ is intertwined with my love of liberty. I also find within the religious component, it answers a lot of the questions that libertarianism does not answer. I read an article recently, I can't remember who wrote it, but sort of was saying that, you can only go so far with the libertarian answers to, and then there's a big now what? Well, a lot of that now what is answered through my religion. Well, now I go and minister to those people who have been kidnapped by the state. Now I go and I minister to those people who are held down by the state in one way or the other, where we're not necessarily guided to do that necessarily through our liberty convictions. I am guided to do that through my religious convictions. I couldn't be who I am without both of those issues being intertwined. And I want to say this, I think I speak for all of us up here, and I think there is a fear, and I think this might be going back to the earlier comment, why do people want to aggress so hard and question us on why we believe what we believe. I think there might be this fear. And I know there are some people who think like this, and I think it's horrible. Even within the liberty community, they want to overthrow the state, but then replace it with some sort of religious version of the state. And I don't think there's a single one of us up here who would do that. We want you to go ahead. One of my greatest inspirations was Roger Williams, the founder of Rhode Island and the First Baptist Church in America. And after he built that church, he looked at that church and said, why do I have that church? And he took his people out into the wilderness because that was where they could truly worship God under God's roof, which is the earth itself. And, he called for the proper treatment of the Native Americans, and that's where he got himself in trouble, was writing to the King of England saying, wait a minute, we can't be stealing these people's land. This is wrong. We have to negotiate with them and pay them something. And of course, that got him isolated and driven out. And eventually, he was killed in battle, in the King's battle. And with that said, I want pagans, I want everyone to be able to join me in my journey of liberty without judgments. We're all trying to live this life as human beings to the best of our abilities. And if it becomes a part of you to embrace a religion, and as long as that religion isn't trying to strip you of your individualism, embrace that religion and hold fast to finding that truth.
For myself, being a self-proclaimed Buddhist and a liberty volunteerist, something along those lines, I find that for me, I don't see a whole lot of difference in my beliefs when it comes to Buddhism and my beliefs in the liberty community. I find that most of my Zen friends and people who are practitioners are kind of liberty people anyway. They just don't call themselves that. So for me, it's been really easy to find a balance point between the two because I don't see there to be much difference. The teacher that I learned from in the Quantum School of Zen, which is a Korean type of Zen, he was in the military for 24 years. He was 20 years in the Army and I think 4 years in the Marines. And when he started getting into Zen at the end of his years in the military, it just step by step he was able to, through Zen and just understanding, remove all of those attachments to the military and the way he did things. And then he spent the last 23 years volunteering and running a Zen center. He spent 16 years at a women's prison just south of where I live in Gainesville, volunteering there, just trying to help women in prisons. And he would spend 20 hours a day for 20 years volunteering his time. Just ran himself. He just finally retired, 70 years old. Ran himself to the ground simply because he didn't know what else to do. And I think when we look at ourselves in the liberty movement, we want to be volunteering and doing things to help everyone else. It's just an interesting story to see that a man who was 24 years in the military, who's done terrible things, and I know for a fact a lot of the reason he went that way was he felt a lot of remorse for things that happened when he was in the military. So he spent the next 23 years volunteering to try to make up for it. And that's an interesting thing for me. I didn't see there to be any difference. Is he a liberty guy? He don't like the government. He don't think we should be paying taxes, and he's really upset about all these other things that the government's doing. But he doesn't really go to any liberty events or do anything. He just runs his Zen center and tries to help everyone that comes and asks him for help, which I think is a really beautiful way of doing things. And that's kind of what I try to do too. I will make a couple comments of where I think my Zen beliefs and my liberty beliefs maybe conflict a little bit. I think like a lot of us, when we ended up in this movement, or at least got introduced to it, we did so because we were upset about things. We are mad at the government. We're tired of paying taxes. I don't like to see where the nature of the country is going. I don't like to see the wars. I don't like to see the dying. I don't like to see our education system. I could go on and on. And I was myself upset for so many years, just angry about all of that. And I still pretty angry about a lot of stuff, and I don't think that's going to go away anytime soon. But what my Zen practice taught me, which was kind of I think a natural extension for me from my liberty beliefs and my Zen beliefs, and they were very separate at one point, as I had a lot of like just anti-government beliefs, and I was never a Democrat or a Republican really. I just stumbled through the political system and never got attached to either. But some of the things that I found interesting was that my Zen stuff started to mesh when I realized that I needed to let go of some of those beliefs. Some of those hate the government, want to charge Washington with all my firearms and take down the government. I realized I can't be like that. Those attachments in myself were hurting me and making me very unhappy. And I was walking around with a bag of Liberty Rocks ready to just throw at the government or anyone who would hear. And I'm like, I don't want to be that kind of guy. I want to be happy and smile and enjoy my day-to-day. So what I started doing was I started meditating a lot. That helped. And I just see the craziness in my mind and how I viewed these things. And I started realizing that I do spend a lot of time. I think a lot of us do in the Liberty community. We spend a lot of time angry. And we are. There's so much going on that we don't like. And I'm still not there, but my Zen training, I guess you could call it, has really helped me let go of some of my beliefs. And I think for me, my Zen is kind of a secondary stage to my liberty movement. I've got to let go of my political beliefs, and I've got to let go of my religious beliefs, is what Buddhism tells me. And you got to let go of just anything that's not healthy for you. So that's how those things have meshed for me, and I want to hand it over to Will.
Well, I guess you could say, because the work that Muslims for Liberty does is kind of twofold. So we don't just come to events like this. We also talk about libertarian ideals within the Muslim community. And whenever I write articles about, Islamic jurisprudence or other issues that are, libertarian positioned, I always end them with the same statement. And because we get a lot of accusations of apologetics. And what the truth of the matter is that we attempt to reintroduce something to people that their forefathers knew. Like, we're bringing information with Muslims for Liberty to Muslims that it's their history. Like, most Muslims don't realize they have a seat at the table of the evolution of liberty. They don't even, if you go up and you ask them questions about the foundational, simple things about Islamic jurisprudence, they don't know any more than anybody else in the audience does. Like, I could ask them the same question I ask anybody here, and they would probably give me the same look and the same answer. So that's part of why we do what we do. Is there's a saying of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ that the ummah is like a body, the community of Muslims is like a body. And if one part is ill, then the whole body is sick. I'm very sick right now. You can look around the world today, and I'm very sick today. I look at the state of my community, and my heart bleeds, like literally the suffering that I see. And like Ben said before he left, like, I can't look and see what's happening there. And I know that Muslims have it within themselves to have this thing because they had it before. It existed for hundreds of years before the West ever came up with this idea before it was ever introduced to Western nations. Muslims were living in voluntarist societies. I know they're capable of going back to the way things were. And seeing the way things are now, it hurts. Like, literally, like it's a pain within myself. And I don't know why it's there. It showed up like a week after I took my Shahada, and I've never been able to get rid of it. And going out and doing the work that we do helps, because I see it spreading. I see groups in Iran setting up Facebook pages, libertarians of the Middle East. I see people in Afghanistan and in Malaysia and in Pakistan and Qatar taking our articles and translating them into Arabic, into Bohasa, into Urdu, and disseminating them. I see people fighting back and claiming their opportunities for liberty, even in the face of danger. And that's why we do what we do. Because somebody has to. Nobody else is doing it. That's why everybody in this room does what they do. Is because if we didn't, who would?
Ben Stone has another commitment, so he had to run out. I'll just sit here and take the Quaker position, I suppose. Any questions anybody has? We'd be happy to field some now. Please come up to the microphone that used to be right here. That one right there.
Mike.
State your name if you would.
Is there a switch on this?
Hold on, she's got a mic.
Okay.
Potted up.
My question is for Will.
Your name?
I'm Dan.
Hi, Dan.
And first of all, I just wanted to say, I totally sympathize. I'm a Christian, and I look at the first 150 years of Christianity, which was the host to possibly the most radical, maybe even the first peace movement of all time, and look at the church today and see what we've lost. So I just wanted to say, solidarity, brother. But on to my question. You may be familiar with the verses in the Christian Bible that people go to try to justify the existence of the state. The tribute episode, render unto Caesar, and then people usually neglect to mention the next part. And Romans 13, let everyone be subject to the higher powers. Are there any verses in the Quran, because I'm not familiar, and I'm sure we'll learn more tomorrow at your event, that cause those problems for you? And if not, what can you say about the differing worldviews between the two religions that might have led to those differences?
There's a hadith actually that people like to reference. It says whenever there is something that's going on, everyone pick the group should come together and pick an emir. Now, what an emir is just a leader, a person who is like here. Our emir was Mark. He was the one who basically made sure everything ran smoothly. We had another emir over here who was taking care of the lighting and the sound. These are people that their job is to make sure that everything runs smoothly whenever something is going on. So if you start a project, there should be someone who delegates. It just simplifies things. But these people shouldn't be chosen because they want to be chosen. That's another thing that's stated, is that leadership should never be given to those who desire it. I mean, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was very, very, very clear on that fact. If you want power, you don't get it. You shouldn't have it, because people that want power are usually corrupt, and people who want power will want more power. And if you have this desire for that, you will satiate it one way or the other, and eventually that will be at the expense of the rights of others. So that's the argument that I use against that, is that it's the Prophet ﷺ said, he said, yes, pick an emir, but he also said never pick anybody who wants to be powerful, who wants to be a leader, and it should be based on merit. Someone who is good at what we're doing. Like if we're building a house, then the emir should be somebody who, I don't know, knows what they're doing at building a house. And that's the basic understanding of it, is that there should be some kind of a leader, quote unquote, but not that they should have any political power over anyone. Salah ad-Din was a leader. He was, by Western definitions, a king. But if he killed the man standing next to him, he'd go to prison, go to trial the same way as anyone else would, because that's the way it works. People are people. Whether you pick them for a position of leadership or not doesn't change their status as to whether or not they have rights or more rights than other people. That's basically the argument that I would use for them, and it's not a verse, it's a hadith, which is just a saying that was attributed to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ about 300 years after he died. So you can take that as you will.
I was wondering, I guess this question's for any of you. If you would want to weigh in on the,
What's your name?
Thick, thin, my name's Andrew. The thick, thin libertarian debate. In particular, some people would say that, so thin libertarianism being just no trespassing, pretty much, and thick libertarianism being these other philosophies, such as perhaps, Stefan Molyneux's philosophy, which is explicitly anti-religious, Ayn Rand's philosophy, which is also explicitly anti-religious, but then, other varieties as well of kind of thick libertarianism is how I've seen it classified. Would religions fall into that, do you think? And what would your response be maybe to those two particular schools of thought in particular, if we want to get controversial?
I'll take a stab at it first, if you guys don't mind. I mean, it's really funny that you actually bring that up, because Davi Barker, he's basically my partner in crime, I guess you would say. Some people have called him the Jefferson to my Adams, because he's a really good writer and I'm kind of a jerk. He wrote something about that. He was like, I think that there should be a discussion among Muslims about thick versus thin, just like there is about thick versus thin libertarianism, where a thin Muslim would be well, I guess me, and I know that even saying it almost sounds like a derogatory term, but basically, right. I believe in La ilaha illallah. I believe that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was the last messenger of Allah. I believe in the angels. I believe in the revealed books. I believe in the prophets, and I believe that one day God will hold me into account for the things that I've done on this earth, and that therefore I'm Muslim. End of story. I believe in the 6 things that are required for you to believe in for you to be Muslim. So I'm a thin Muslim. I don't think that I have to have a beard that's a specific length. I don't think that you have to wear a certain hat or a certain robe or speak a certain language or come from a certain tribe or any of that stuff. None of that stuff matters. All these the cultural. I mean, that's one of the beauties of being a Muslim convert is I get to be a Muslim without all the cultural crap from overseas. As long as I'm really lucky and I have people that can guide me away from the cultural crap that you'll find in the immigrant community a lot in this country. So other Muslims that are converts will say that to you too. Like, we get to experience it without the cultural baggage of thick Islam. We get to experience it just as the texts state from the scholars. And most of us, I'm finding, even the non-libertarian, like people that don't identify themselves as libertarian Muslims, they're seeking out the non-state sponsored scholars. It's almost as if they have this understanding that's just natural that government paid for scholars are probably going to give you really bad information. And a lot of your thick Islam comes from governments forcing cultural beliefs into the religion through law. So I think it's a great debate. Like I said, Davi just brought it up a couple of weeks ago. There should be a debate among Muslims about this idea of thick versus thin. I mean, there are those of us who believe in the simplicity of Islam, and then there are those of us who have decided that there's like a laundry list that's 1,500 things long in order to be a good Muslim.
As a real quick follow-up, would you say thick versus thin Islam is completely a different issue than thin versus thick libertarianism? So it seems like...
Well, both of them are ideological. Both of them are ideological. I think thick versus thin Islam could have more serious ramifications, because thick Islam, some versions of thick Islam have been known to do some not too cool things, because most of those people, there's actually a prophetic tradition, and then I'll pass this on, but you might find this interesting, that during the end of days, there's a Muslim sect that's supposed to rise, and they'll be really long beards, and they'll be thick. Basically, they will have this extremely exaggerated piety, and they'll have like this laundry list of all these external things that they have to do to be a good Muslim. But they will stand and call Muslims to the gates of hell because they condone the shedding of innocent blood. So I thought that was something you guys might find interesting to go with that.
So the Quaker condition comes, the Quaker tradition comes out of Christianity, and I like a lot of the Proverbs. I don't believe for a second Solomon said that. I think it didn't say the first 29 chapters. However, I like a lot of them, and it's as steel sharpens steel. Yeah, I don't know what to do about it. As steel sharpens steel, so one man sharpens another. It's probably the battery and the broadcasting back to the board that's having some trouble ducking in and out. And we really have that in spades, Liberty Movement. We're really good at debating issues. And the problem is we're not so great at doing it in a way that makes other people feel good at the end of it. And that's something that we really need to work on. And so I'm as thin as they come as far as the Liberty Movement. If it's free and if it's voluntary, it's for me. That's it. I don't care if your wife drags you around on a leash. Doesn't matter to me. It's not my thing. Awesome. That's the end of my thought process on it. So, that's why I feel we need the big tent. The little tent, it pushes people out. That's what it's all about. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Nope. You put your kids in timeout. You can't be in here. And I'm not for it. That's not for me.
Yeah, I have a couple things I'll comment on that. Since my Zen beliefs and my liberty beliefs are so close to one another, I'd have to say I'm a very thick liberty person, I guess. Only because what Zen puts forth is you need to do this 100% because that's your life. You're in your life 100% of the time. And you don't get a break. You can't just be 80% of the time being responsible and doing your best and then just 20% of your time willy-nilly. So when I look at my liberty beliefs, I can't say something like, oh, yeah, you can pay my state taxes, but I don't want to pay property taxes, or I support local cops, but I don't support the military. You have to 100% be with your beliefs, and maybe not even beliefs, but just how you view those things and act upon them when you're called to do so. So for me, I guess I would say I'm a very, 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 very thick libertarian, but in a different way maybe than some other people might look at that. I look at my Zen stuff as I got to live my life all the time and do my absolute best always. And it is daunting, it is relentless, and it is all the time. And when you find yourself in a situation that maybe you can do something about it in your liberty life, then you need to address that 100% like you would anything else in your life. So I'm going to pass this to Brian.
Just real quick, the only place I'm thick is in my gut. I mean, everywhere else, I'm completely thin. I mean, I'm thin in my liberty beliefs. I'm thin in my religious beliefs. Everything really comes back to one thing. It's up to the individual. If the individual feels God, great, embrace that, take that path. I'm sure not going to force it on you. I'm not going to force my liberty beliefs on you either. It's my beliefs or my own beliefs. Just leave me alone when I need to be left alone. It's as simple as that.
Hi. Is this on? Yep. I'm Mike Vine. So first, I'd just like to say, the fact that you bring voluntarist beliefs to your various religious communities, I think, is tremendously commendable. And I would prefer that you stay in those traditions if it meant bringing more people to voluntarism. But I've personally run into a problem. I grew up in the Reformed Jewish community in New York, which is as close to atheist as you get in the world, maybe outside of the Buddhist community. And moving to New Hampshire, I was confronted more with evangelical messages, various deeply committed religious messages, and it sort of takes me off guard. And I've posted. We've had little Facebook exchanges where I've posted on the major holidays where it says "He has risen" or whatever the post may be. I've said, imagine you think you've found a community of people that think like you do, that apply critical thinking, and then suddenly they're all talking about something that just seems crazy to you. Basically seems it's stuff that has disconnected from your day-to-day life in the natural world that and a lot of the response I get is, well, the nap and this is not your business, and I respect that, but at the end of the day, I also feel kind of a duty to address it and say, well, shouldn't we be using critical thinking when it comes to these supernatural beliefs? So it's kind of a not really a question there, but the question is, like, how do you reconcile that? What would you say to someone like me about who's a materialist, tries to view things through an empirical lens about your beliefs? Do you think they impact how you feel about science and empirical topics, or is it just a separate domain?
I'd say for me, it's a separate domain. I mean, again, I guess what I would say to you is, hey, brother, let's sit down and have a beer or a cup of coffee or something and talk about these things. And I think when we walk away, you're going to realize this really wasn't that much of an issue to begin with. I think that your thinking comes from, I'm not trying to judge here, but I think that type of thinking does come from, and rightly so. I mean, look at what Gary North said about let's return to an Old Testament community where we're stoning people to death. Ridiculous. And I think that's where a lot of that comes from. And if you really sit down and talk to some, you're going to find some whack jobs. But talk to me or any of these guys up here right now, you're not going to find that despite that.
Just as a corollary, there are obviously some things in the scripture of each religion that you would say run contrary to voluntarism. I'd also be curious how you touched on it a little bit, how those reconcile.
Not in my own personal traditions, maybe in the Old Testament, but I don't see anything that, if they hit you, then you should hit them back, is what my faith book says, and I think that's pretty voluntarist in my personal opinion. As far as like your comment about critical thinking, actually, the funny thing that you say that Quran actually specifically has a verse that says that the most cursed in the sight of Allah are those who refuse to use their intellect. So, for the Muslim, the concept of God is based in the in the intellect, like you think therefore kind of thing. Like the protection of intellect is actually one of the 5 main foundational goals of law in Sharia, is to protect intellect. So the anti-intellectualist argument just really doesn't resonate with me, I guess you could say. Like maybe for like 14th century Christians, but personally it doesn't resonate with me, because my faith and my religious books specifically tell me use your brain and think. So I mean, my faith tells me to use critical thinking, so I don't see how you could say you're giving up critical thinking, because it just doesn't, my brain doesn't work that way. I'm sorry.
Can I back and forth, or have I talked too much?
I'm afraid they're turning the lights out on us. So, it's as intriguing as this long-running debate is, I'm afraid that's it. Thank you, everybody, for coming so much.
Thank you.